Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmett Lewis, and my glorious co-host, Mikael Christiansen. The gruesome twosome are back in the house. How are things going, Mikael? It's great to have you back on at the same time as me.
Yay, finally. Actually talking computer screen to computer screen again instead of staring blankly into the void as I was recording last time. Yeah, not too bad. Still in Turkey at Tada. If you don't know what Tada is, it is an artist collective that, or like
Artist
Tada
habitat, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you actually know what Tada stands for,
It's
Emmett?
Till and Denise's artist habitat.
Exactly. And it's pretty sick. Huge house, enormous house actually. It's so fucking big, this house. It's stupid. Huge garden. Like it's incredible. They have a big training space here, and it's basically completely secluded from absolutely everything. And there is barely, like, people don't go anywhere. So I mean, one of the girls here, I think she hasn't left the property for almost a year. It's that kind of place. It's so insulated, and also it's so easy to be here that you can just like basically just zone out here. But yeah, I'm doing volunteer work here, helping with some construction work and stuff, learning loads about that. Super interesting. Doing a bunch of handstands when I have time. Today it was really fucking hot. Yeah, can't complain. Definitely can't complain. Apparently up in Scandinavia, it still hasn't become spring, so fuck that shit.
Yeah, we're kind of pissing rain here in Ireland. We had a bit of sun, but nothing compared to what you have. And yeah, it's pretty cool. You can always check out Till and Denise's artist habitat on Instagram if you want to get a feel for the vibe. It's also where we host our retreats every year. Well, not last year, but yeah, fuck the Rona. Anyway, yeah, so it is where we host our retreats, and it's one of those places, like, it is fantastic what they've done there. It's definitely a big shout out to them. And, you know, if you're into circus and want a training holiday, they do, they have different phases of the year, I suppose, isn't it? Where it's, they have like a hostel going on there, and they have residencies and different courses. There's a lot of other people run retreats there too. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, they have several different kinds of like volunteering projects too. Like you can do like full volunteering where you don't pay anything. You can do like half volunteering. There are many like different options in terms of how they organize, and there's like an application procedure on their website. We can link all of that stuff in terms of doing volunteering here, and it also depends on like what season they're in and like what kind of people they might be looking for and so on. But yeah, it is absolutely incredible to be here. And yeah, I was planning to stay for a month. Now I've been here for almost 2, and yeah, just working a bit, doing some fucking handstands. Can't complain.
It's definitely one of those things. I think the volunteering aspect is cool. Is if you're kind of in circus school or that kind of thing, if you're one of these people, like particularly if you're into juggling, like the training space is awesome, but like Till is fucking amazing at juggling. He is like, he's got multiple world records in like crazy stuff like 6 balls overhead and all these kind of things. So like, yeah, he's very impressive specimen in terms of juggling. Denise is pretty good as well, other stuff, but Till is exceptionally good at juggling. So if you're into juggling and other stuff, you wanted to volunteer and get some coaching, you know, it would be there would be worse ways to spend your time, put it that way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But again, as usual, we have a topic, don't we?
Do we ever? We have a topic, yes. So we've launched our new program, Expand, and we are going to talk about some of the things that happen in the program. And Expand was a kind of interesting program because it was kind of us putting together bits and pieces, and we had the idea of like a video game expansion pack. And for those of you who don't play video games, an expansion pack is kind of like you have the main game, which is your normal handstand training, and then an expansion pack adds bits onto it. So it's not the program. It's not a main course program, is the way I think about it. It's not a definite goal, but it has things that it teaches you that you can add into your practice at sort of any stage. So in the program, we look at moving on the hands, what we're going to talk about in the podcast. So that includes walking, running, moving in circles, hopping on the hands, these kind of things. We have how to use canes, how to get up on them safely, down, all these kind of things, how to condition for it as well. And then we have like the introduction to head movements, like not just looking at toes, but how to move the head and all this. So it's kind of fun that way. But I suppose our topic today is moving on the hands. And moving on the hands is one of these things I find it's interesting because, like, I suppose for us who kind of do hand balance and handstands, we stay on one spot. But moving on hands is definitely a thing. And it's definitely one of the things that's kind of fallen out of favor in the circus world in some ways. But it used to be like the thing to do on your hands. I can even think of like
it used
one
to
of
be
the
big.
yeah, I can even think of like finding some old vaudeville act where it was a circus family or vaudeville family, and their act was tap dancing on their hands.
Yeah,
And
it's classic.
they were like ridiculously good. They were,
Mm.
I can't tap dance, so I can't tell you exactly how good, but like they were very good in terms of rhythms and timings. And it's kind of, and these kind of things, navigating obstacle courses and hopping was a classic. And hopping on the little cane, I don't know if you've seen that one, but
Yeah,
yeah.
like kind of like a crutch you do like handstand hops on. Yeah, but it used to be kind of, or like even in like semi newer stuff I've also seen, like, I mean, you have some of the Chinese acts where you have like one thing that comes to mind is like still the most impressive but stupidest and most ugly looking move I've ever seen is a Chinese guy that he has one crutch that he jumps up some stairs on one arm, on one crutch, and then as he gets on top of the platform, he comes down, takes the applause, and then I think he gets a mouthpiece to spin 2 rings on. He puts those into his and then he starts spinning those 2 rings. Then he spins 2 rings on his arm, and he spins 1 ring on one leg, and then the other leg then he kicks up into a one-arm hopping sequence, and then one leg is kicking while he's spinning all of these fucking rings, and then he jumps down the stairs on one arm, and it looks like an absolute fucking mess. And that's what I love about it, because it's so insanely impressive, but it all just looks like a fucking spastic, ugly ass. There's nothing pretty about it whatsoever. It's glorious.
Yeah, it's just pure. Yeah, that act. I'll see if I can find the video for it. I think I have it saved on YouTube, and I'll put it onto the show notes for you to watch. But it is they do some of the craziest stuff in that. They do also do like handstand on handstand, one arm on one arm. There's a pair of them in it who were kind of mixing it up, if I remember right.
Yes, yeah, I do think they do one arm on one arm, but like they do the bass does a handstand, Flyer does a handstand on top of him, and then he does a one arm on that one leg, and then he comes back to 2 arms, and then he does a fucking drop onto his neck and kind of like catches him around the shoulders, and then the other guy goes to some sort of planche, but like the fact that he drops on like from handstand on his feet and like grabs him around the shoulders is just like nuts. Yeah, we'll link that. I have that also on YouTube, so we'll for sure put that up.
Is that the act where they finish where the guy holds the Flyer in his one arm, like a one arm basing situation? Then he kind of, it's hard to describe this, but he puts his other hand down and he does like a one arm flag, and then the other person is on his arm, the offhand is up, and the guy then presses to one arm. So he's doing a one arm on a guy doing a one arm flag.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think they do that one in this act. I'm not sure. I think
that's the finale move.
I think they have that in there somewhere. But anyway, in terms of all of these things in terms of moving on your hands that are not as crazy as that.
You got to start somewhere, though.
Yeah, like it's a very like you said, it's kind of fallen out of favor, and it's more like it's if you've done gymnastics, or like, I mean, so many gymnasts I know, they're better at walking on their hands than standing, since it's a very relevant skill for all kinds of acrobatic work. I mean, if you can't move on your hands as an acrobat, then like you are missing out on basically most of the vocabulary. Like even doing something as simple as a cartwheel is really moving on your hands in one sense.
I think Yuri Marmerstein, who we had on the podcast, he had an interesting tutorial. I didn't really think of it, but then he had a tutorial for teaching walking, or his preferred way of teaching walking is to teach it as cartwheels, going sort of up to 45 degrees when you're learning. and then going from side to side, and then just doing multiple kind of tick-tocky cartwheels to get the hip action. So, a cartwheel could be thought of as a sidestep on the hands. I thought when I seen that, I was like, oh, that's quite. It was just something where like a light bulb went on. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I never thought of it that way. So it's kind of teaching the old dog some new tricks. Thank you for that, Yuri. But so it's one of those things. Like, I think walking is an interesting one because a lot of people, like, walking is easier than standing on your hands for a lot of people. A lot of people, that's what they learn when they start to do handstands. You see this say in older people physical education class, aka CrossFit, where the handstand walk is the thing. And
it's a go-to.
I can even remember in watching either CrossFit Games or regionals or something, and they had a handstand. You had to accumulate 30 or 40 seconds in a handstand. But the rules of the handstand they had was there was a circle of a certain size drawn on the floor, and you had to stay inside the circle. So it wasn't a stand, and you could step to catch your balance. But at the same time, it was still it was just interesting that they recognized, oh, maybe people couldn't stand on a spot on their hands, but they gave them this allowance of walking for balance.
Yeah, it's also like I know actually a fair amount of people who are very competent at standing, and then they can't walk particularly well, which is something I find interesting, since I was one of the ones that learned to walk first. Like, basically, like my absolute first meeting with handstands was actually after karate practice, when I was training that at like 16 or so. I just started like trying to stand on my hands for some reason, just kicked up and then walking around was what I did for some reason. And it was around the same time I got interested in breaking, of course. But like I would walk around. That's what I did, and I would have my legs in some sort of semi-straddle thing. And I remember very well when another friend of mine, he could do kind of like a very banana bent arm handstand. He said like, you can stand still if you just grip really, you grab the floor really hard with your fingers. And then he taught me that, and I was like, whoa, I can actually stand still. That's pretty cool. But it was so. Like the walking and just like shifting weight back and forth with like quite wide arm position and wrists turned outwards, that was kind of my preferred way. Though, as I said, like there are, I think also since handstand training now like spread through the style of handstand training spread through the internet. I mean, it is quite uniform, regardless of what coach you have. It seems like a lot of the vocabulary are rather similar in terms of like the roadmap towards like the various high-end skills and so on. But that's the thing, that like stuff such as moving on your hands, walking in space and so on, it kind of it doesn't really get a space. And I mean, it doesn't need to in that specific format, but I do think it's a very valuable thing to learn, and also in terms of the fact that you do get more freedom, you do get more options, and it's just like a new way of handling and controlling the body upside down.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think it really there's a great quote about walking, just normal walking. I can't remember who it is, so if anyone remembers where I heard this from, please DM it to us so we can give some bit of credit. But the person was describing as walking is a series of catastrophes just avoided. And what that means is like when you're walking, like to walk, you basically have to lose balance. You lose balance in the direction you're going, and then you catch yourself. And then if you're running to go faster, you lose balance faster or further. You get a bigger lean angle, and you go faster. So you're kind of falling in the direction, catching yourself. I think that really, if walking on your feet is a series of catastrophes nearly avoided, I think walking on your hands is kind of, I don't know, can we joke about it? Avoiding multiple Chernobyl incidences at any point, particularly when you're learning. It is this like idea that like we do have this way of balancing, that we normally control the balance on the point, but there is the horizontal translation, the horizontal movement of the base of support to catch the center of mass as it moves outside. You can move the hands underneath yourself. And this, I suppose, is the basis of all the walking. Like, it doesn't matter which direction, if you're going forwards, backwards, sideways. you lose balance in the direction you want to go, you
Yeah.
fall slightly, and then hopefully you move your hand in time, and this gets you moving. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, there is a bit of hip action in there and other stuff, which, yeah, I suppose, Mikael, you had a good tutorial on Instagram recently showing the difference between the hip action of walking and the hip action of the one arm.
Yeah, yeah. They're like it's hugely different, and I think in that sense, it can be good for people to not dabble too much with walking, maybe too early on, or at least, or it's not a problem dabbling with walking. The problem is just not understanding the difference
Yeah.
between the kind of the way they move um, and particularly starting to do stuff like block walks without having the understanding of what the hip does in a one arm handstand and in regular handstand walking, because then you might just end up doing handstand walking when walking up and down the blocks, and you're not training the thing you're trying to train. You're achieving the task of walking up and down the blocks, but you're not achieving what the task was designed to teach you. So I kind of call it the cardinal sin of gymnasts learning to one arm. I mean, just because they're so good at walking, and then they go to what they're good at when they try to solve the task. Of course, most gymnasts are pretty good on their hands, and they learn it quickly. So it's just that is something that they will be likely to move into a walking trajectory simply because they are really good at doing kind of the walking actions. But yeah, that kind of falling that is involved with it, I think that's what stops some people that are just very controlled on their hands, and they're fine with standing still, but as soon as stuff moves in space, they don't know how to respond to this, to taking the steps. And for some, it can also be scary, just like, okay, but how am I going to hold all my weight on one arm? Well, you aren't really, because you're distributing, like you're moving away from that hand, and you're kind of falling onto the next step. And it's a cool kind of comparison, though, if you compare like walking on your feet versus walking on your hands, because when you walk on your feet, like we're so trained at it, and we're so sensitive to it, and the legs are such effective tools to do the job, that like you don't feel the falling to get kind of momentum, and then the response of the leg. You feel much more just that like you move your legs and you do so, and like there's of course a combination of all these things, but in handstand it's much more evident that like you kind of either you pull the heels, and like if you're going to walk forwards, you pull the heels forwards, or you let yourself drop by not activating the fingers, and then respond by moving the arm. So it's much kind of it's much clearer, that kind of falling action when you're doing a handstand walking compared to feet.
Yeah, I can remember I seen the show before I was in circle. It was one of these kids shows on TV, or one of those kind of daytime TV shows, and they were doing an interview with this guy who had the world record for walking on his hands, and it was something crazy. Like it was an American dude, obviously, and it was let me think. It was something like in the miles, not even in like the hundreds of meters. It was like that kind of long. But this guy, it was kind of interesting. They had a bit of an interview with him, and then he'd done some stuff, walking up steps and things like this. And he, at the time I didn't really know much, but, then later on I kind of think back to it. And one thing that struck out at me even at the time was he was saying like, oh, I just, when I was 10 or 11, I just decided I wanted to walk on my hands. So I would just walk on my hands all the time, and I'd get obsessed with it. I just would walk, and I'd be the kid walking to school on my hands, and, try to walk as far as I can and get my friends into it, but they didn't stick with it. But the thing that struck me was like his arms were jacked. Like his arms were like scarily big for a kid to look at. And I was just like, oh, now that I think about it, obviously because he would walk, he'd walk on his hands. He lived in Las Vegas, where he can be a bit weird anyway. And he just would walk. He'd go to casinos. He'd walk around. They had shots of him playing slot machines with his feet. He was very good at using his feet as well to lift things. Like that was kind of thing. He was like picking up like glasses of beer with his feet and not spilling anything, all this kind of stuff. So it was kind of interesting. But his arms, I can still remember to this day, his arms were just like big and chiseled. Maybe he worked out in a gym, but as far as I can remember, he wasn't that stacked. But it kind of shows like that kind of vertical loading that develops our legs. If he was doing kind of an equal amount, maybe that's the key to getting really big arms, is just to walk on your hands everywhere.
Yeah.
It was kind of, it was interesting. Yeah, it was kind of, he was doing all the things like going up and down stairs, going around things, navigating all obstacles. And it kind of, still, it just stuck to me today. Maybe that's what started the obsession back in the day, now that I think about it. But it was cool. It's definitely cool. And it's kind of one of those things that you do it a lot in gymnastics. And well, when I was coaching kids gymnastics and kids sports acro, I do it a lot towards the end of the session, setting up an obstacle course.
Yeah, that's a classic. It's super cool.
Then getting the kids to go over it, like, set up a stack of mats, whatever height, one of those sloper blocks where you go down, so you have to either go up or down it, over a springboard, all these kind of things, put in some turns. And it's definitely one of those ways, like, if you ever coach kids and they're kind of annoying you, or they're just kind of, you need to get them distracted on something, setting up an obstacle course where someone wins a prize towards the end, if they get through the whole course, is a great way to get them to focus. A bit of friendly competition. It's kind of...
Yeah, I remember, like, for audition to circuit school, we had a handstand obstacle course as well. It wasn't a hard one, though, but, like, there was, like, basically the task was walk across the floor, turn around and come back. And when you were coming back, you had to walk inside these circles, and then you had to walk over a thing, and then like maybe onto some parallel bars or blocks or whatever it was. But I think there's a lot of training like that is basically just, if we look at this kind of more modern internet-based handstand training community, like these things are gone. Like it's more just like you train your fingertip holds, you train your press to handstand, you train your pike handstand, your handstand push-ups. Like you don't go for sets of walking for distance or for time or for whatever it is. And it's not like it's necessary, but I do definitely think it's an interesting part of the training, and definitely something that adds variation and loads of control upside down. And again, like speaking from my experience from breaking, like there it's all about moving on the hands, and it's really interesting to see, like you have these b-boys who like I can't remember what video it was, but I've seen several guys who are like they are in a handstand and they kind of shuffle a bit around, like they walk a bit, because like they can obviously stand still on their hands, but like they'd rather shuffle around a bit, and then he whips his legs and then he just like flies through air flares and like all of like the craziest ass moves. But like just in the handstand he chooses to just shuffle a bit rather than balance and control like in one static spot. And this is like just again like another type of common, or like in that field there is more use for this kind of dynamic response to balance rather than the kind of more static and more like still one. But I do think there's definitely a place for that within hand balancing, and particularly for those who are interested in branching out. Since I mean in terms of like circling back to, you mentioned expand in the beginning, I mean it is essentially that we were also thinking, like if you're interested in expanding like the kind of the various skills and the various things you can do on your arms, that is definitely a starting point. It's
definitely I'll describe it. And this so you just kind of got me thinking of b-boys walking on their hands. Do you remember that like old school one of those clips that was viral back in the day, in the early days of the internet, of Bboy Jr? And he was doing like intimidating people out of, I don't know, is it a circle in breakdancing or the space between the two crews? Whatever the dance was.
Yeah, there is this one clip where like he was kind of running on his fists forwards.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I think just bullying someone out of the space so he could just continue to do his planche spins and stuff like that. It was kind of it's just like it's definitely a very impressive thing. Obviously, he's a very impressive breaker. Even
Yeah,
is
yeah.
he still impressive by today's standard?
Yeah, I mean, like he always kind of had his own thing though. Like since I mean, he does have kind of the leg issue and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, but he was also like a very much of an innovator for that like strength style of breaking. Like the first one I can remember was Crazy Cujo, like doing like loads of planches and stuff like that. And then kind of it was Junior after that. Probably several more that were also doing it, but Junior was kind of whoa shit blowing people out of the water because people just hadn't seen any of that kind of stuff before. I met him once
yeah,
in Norway. Actually, he was judging some battles there. Um, yeah, it was pretty fucking cool to see him live. He's super small, jacked as hell, and yeah, like because he has that like obviously he has the leg issue, so he has light legs, but like he does have that. He is insanely strong, and he's like it looks like he's flying when he does those things because it looks so easy.
yeah,
So like he can really like create the illusion with the movement rather than like even if you see someone doing a planche like a super strong straight planche, yes, it does look anti-grav, but it looks demanding. It looks like they're like holding it by force. But to
yeah,
him, when you see him doing it, it's just like okay, yeah, like it's banana or weird shaped like in break-in, but like yeah, it looks anti-grav, and that was like always his appeal, I felt.
yeah. He had some. I can remember some cool things he was doing, like basically like a spinning on one arm in a planche.
Yeah, he has that thing, and like then he kind of twists it to a flag, and then like goes out through some sort of bridgey thing.
Yeah, shit, that was some impressive. I need to look that up. That video was awesome.
Yeah,
We need to put that
yeah,
in
he has
the
some in the show
need
notes. Like yeah, I
in the
think that
show
was like
notes.
an old video from like maybe it was an old IBE. I think a
Yeah,
battle. I think that particular clip was from. Just I'll also see if I find something more recent of him. But
yeah,
anyway, like that's also like one thing in terms of like the moving on hands thing. Because of course, like you can walk forwards. Pretty simple concept. Let go of balance and then move your hands. You can walk backwards. Same thing. Like you need to kind of keep your legs straight and almost like you almost just like let yourself as if you would fall on your stomach. Keep moving your arms backwards, sideways as well. Like sideways, like you need to kind of do that like wiggly hip shifting or one arm handstand kind of shifts. But then you also have like the circle walks, which I find to be the most interesting walking or interesting walks on the hands since like
yeah,
there again like you have like the very gymnasticy style where like you have the legs together like as on parallel bars. Like I've seen so many gymnast drills where it's like you stand in the parallel bars and you step to kind of a single bar handstand and then back to two and then back to single and so on.
yeah,
And all these drills, I mean, of course, like if you're going to be good at parallel bars and you can't do that stuff, you're basically missing out. But yeah, I really like that kind of thing because it does involve some falling, but it involves a lot more uh, like precision and decisive falling in a sense. Like you're actively rotating your body to where you want to place the hand next,
yeah,
and then you put your hand down, and you need to kind of be able to, at least if you want to do very good circular walks, you need to be in the kind of a position when you land with your hands where you could potentially stay.
yeah. Definitely. It's one of those things like I use it not a lot, but I use it with people when learning one arms to do a flagged straddle flag or semi flagged hip to the diagonal angle you want for one arm, and then teach them to rotate both in the moving backwards direction, clockwise and anti clockwise, to teach people how to control rotation. And it's quite a nice drill that it kind of, yeah, it can be quite nice. You can do it obviously like the gymnastic style in 4 steps. You can also just do it in as many steps as you want, but learning to initiate the rotation with the hips can be quite good to give people a base, just like we have our over and under balance of like over and under rotation, I suppose, in the one arm. So you can go, oh, this rotation makes me twist this way, twist out of my handstand. But if I learn to rotate the opposite direction, then I have a way of correcting it. It's one of the ones. Maybe I've kind of forgotten about it lately. I need to put it back in some people's programs. but it's definitely very good. I use it a lot with some more advanced people, just getting these kind of rotations quite nice. And it's interesting as well because the normal rotation in a straddle, you're keeping like a normal level straddle handstand, where this one you want to set the diagonal angle you would use in a one arm, and then try to rotate from there and initiate the rotation with the legs. So that's
it's more similar to what you would do if you would be on 4 blocks or on 4 canes, and you'd want to do like a half. You would want to like turn around there, like then you'd kind of in principle shift to a one arm, and then you shift to a one arm and a one arm as you move around like that. And of course you don't need to stay a long time on each arm, but like it's more that type of rotation where you deliberately set up like a one arm handstand angle. Whereas like the other way though, like I mean the gymnast classic way, of course, legs together, since that like you keep that kind of tight shape. Whereas like if you have your legs open and you start moving in a circle, that's like of course my favorite, is because like if you start walking in a circle with your legs open, like your legs start like dragging momentum, and like in the end like your legs are moving fast, so that you're basically following the momentum of your legs. And like you just basically turn you turn one of your, like if you walk if you walk clockwise, you would turn your right hand outwards quite a lot, so you can grab the floor with the wrist turned further. So when you catch, you untwist the wrist to kind of add speed to it, which is something I absolutely love to do, because it just very easily adds loads and loads of momentum. And it's very hard for beginners to do, because they like if the angle of the rotation of the legs is not parallel to the floor, they start going diagonal, and you're going to have a very miserable fall.
Miserable fall. Speaking of rotating on arms, what is like in the 90s and breakdance in 1990s, which is spinning on one arm? I remember I tried to learn them many years ago, but I gave up. Probably should go back to them at some point. Maybe you'll coach me on that. But there was a walking drill where you're kind of going from almost like a downward dog and kind of walking and placing the hands. I remember you taught it to me at one point as well. Sometime
yes.
5-6 years ago, where you're going in and out of the drill with the arms and legs in the reverse order, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's the kind of like, it's basically the power move kick. So what you do is that you, like, I think the best way to describe it is that if you stand, and let's say you're going to do it clockwise, you stand on your feet with your legs like slightly apart, and then you would imagine that like you're going to rotate your left arm down and place it where your right leg is, and the right leg is then picked up, and then you're going to place your right hand where the left leg was, and the left leg is going to be picked up. And like now saying that, it sounds very confusing, but what this implies that you need to rotate, because what you're going to try to do is you are going to try to face like you're going to make a 180 degree turn essentially. So what this does is that if you like in the beginning you keep the legs low, which basically like turns it into these like small skippy hoppy things around, and then over time you can bring it all the way into a handstand, and when you get up there, you get up with your legs very like in a large split, and if you do this fast, of course you can have loads of momentum in it, and that's how people usually set up 1990s. Like they place the second hand slightly differently depending on their technique, since in 90s you want to center it under your face quite a lot. But fuck that move. It's so hard. It's like I've said to several people that like I think if I spent 80% of all the hours I spent on handstands only on 90s, I'd still not be close to the best guys in the world. Like that's how fucking hard it is. Like I think the world record now is like 34 or something by a 9-year-old Russian kid named Bboy Jr, and the second place is by Punisher. I think Punisher did 32 rounds, and it's like the precision which those guys spin is just surgery. It is fucking insane. Like, if you think that a one-arm handstand is like volatile and falls easily, or like a one-arm hand, like a Svitchka one-arm handstand is volatile and falls easily, you haven't done a 90-90. That shit is way worse. It's just like you can I would literally compare it in the sense of standing on one leg versus doing nice pirouettes. Like, that's almost the difficulty difference, but at the same time, that analogy doesn't really work, because a person that can do nice pirouettes will by default be able to stand on one leg, whereas like I'm not sure, like I'm 100% sure I'm better at standing on one arm than both of those guys that did that many turns. So it's very specific, but in terms of just like raw difficulty, I just like shit my pants 1,000 times over when I watch that stuff. Holy fuck.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's kind of like leads on to the other thing of what's interesting. You see this obviously a lot in breakdancing and in the passing circus, is the jumping on hands.
Yes.
And these kind of things, it's kind of with the Handhops, which we have in the program as well. It's one of those things, like obviously in breakdance, I can remember like obviously seeing this, but there was one dude, so there was one of these circus clubs in one of the universities in my early days that I would go to. And they'd also split the hall with the breakdance society. So they'd be half breakdance, half circus and juggling. There was one of the breakdancers, the guy who was like leading the class and teaching it and head of society. He was very, very good. But hand hops were his thing, like on one arm. And I was kind of talking to him like, oh, how do you do this, blah, 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 how do you do that? He was showing me. And like, he could do 50 or 60 hand hops, no problem. And I'm pretty certain he couldn't hold a stable handstand. He could walk on his hands, he could do loads of other stuff, but that kind of dynamic balancing is it's interesting, because in some ways you don't have to balance, you just have to place your landing right and then just deal with it when you get there. I think like obviously, I think you learned a lot of hand hopping back in the day as well.
Yeah, that's like, that was basically my entrance portal to a one-arm handstand. Like most breakers I know that like easily learn to one arm is because they had good hand hops and a decent air baby, and yeah, it just gives you experience in the area. You don't learn to balance from the hand and stuff, but obviously if you can jump on one arm 35 times, it means that like your shoulder stability is probably pretty decent, like same muscle group, same ish type of position that you'll use and so on, but yeah, like anything from just like jumping on two arms, I think it has like loads of application for people that are doing, just regular handstands as well. And like you said, it used to be huge in kind of the old school circus days. Like there again, like the classic move of like back handspring to one arm jumping downstairs, jumping upstairs on one arm, classic Chinese trick, like just jumping across stage, like all these kind of things, like they not even like super hard things, but basically learning to like for me, like learning to jump on two arms also gives you, if you'd ever want to like just only follow the standardized handstand vocabulary, if that's all you ever wanted to do, but you want to learn one arm switches, for example, well, if you can't jump on two arms, then you're missing out, because you need that. You just need to understand, okay, what is it that happens in my legs, and like how do I generate the upwards force, and that is something I find very interesting in terms of the jumping on arms, because there is like this kind of like small shrug, like a tiny explosive shrug that happens, but like the vast amount of force comes from kind of the kicking out of your leg, which raises your center of mass a huge amount, and as that happens, you add that little pop, and like you fly several centimeters up if you're doing this properly. And again, like it can be tough on the wrist since you have an impact landing, but at the same time, you're if you're doing like 10 hops and then come down, like you're never really using your forearm flexors and fingers to grab the floor and adjust. So you don't need to do any rough adjustments. All you need to do is keep kicking and keep replacing the arms in kind of the proper position under you. And that's something that also just happens by itself. like it's a little bit similar to a pogo stick. Like it's not super hard to keep pogo stick jumps going because like if you just hold the fucking thing straight, then like you're going to land kind of on it. And like if one jump wasn't great, you jump again and you might have another chance at catching yourself, and then you jump again and you might have another chance to catch yourself. So you kind of constantly keep moving like that. And that's like super relevant, particularly when learning to hop on one arm. And now I'm going to give you a very quick tutorial on jumping on one arm. So it goes like this: learn to jump on two arms, so that you can do like 15 to 20 jumps on two arms. Then start trying to jump on one arm at the end.
Yeah, I think just to refine that a bit, there's one crucial detail that makes the jumping work, or makes multiple jumps work versus one jump, is it's easiest to learn in a tuck. But one of those things when I learned them back in the day was once you get the idea of you go from a tuck, you kick up, that generates the momentum up, then you land, but you want to get the legs back down, chambered into the kicking position to go again.
Yep, super
and
important.
It's kind of, I remember like I learned in tuck and I wasn't that good at it, but what I learned was doing it in split handstand. So bringing the legs not into the straddle but into like a front split and doing like a scissor kick.
Scissor kicks, yeah.
Yeah, because you kick, the legs are reaching in the middle in your straight handstand kind of position. That gives you the up. And then by the time you're down, you're into the other split. You're into your good split, e.g. your bad split. And you'll constantly kicking this way. And I found that one I learned. I learned them actually on a trampoline of all places.
Right. Yeah, but like scissor kicks was the first one I learned too. Like only like later when I saw the other guys, like that's when I started doing like the tuck version of it. It reminds me, I haven't done one arm scissor kicks in fucking forever. I should try that someday.
You should hang it up on your Instagram tomorrow.
Yeah, it's been a fucking while since I did that. It's hilarious. I think I jump better on my elbow now than on one arm, but it's like. That's the thing. Like it was a joke that you just need to try to do it on one arm, but it takes a fair bit of practice. But the interesting thing about learning to hop on one arm is if you have good hops on two arms and you have like a decent ability to kind of like flip yourself up into sort of like you're not going to a one arm handstand. If you can get into a position on one arm where you can try to do a shitty kick, and it might just feel like trash, but if you feel your hand moving. And it feels stable and it feels safe. All you need to do is keep doing this. Like you do one kick, and as Emmet said, it's super important. You kick and you replace the legs. So it's like I always look upon the rhythm as kind of like up down. So like kind of having the impulse on the down, because like what always happens when people mess them up is that you have like a couple of kicks where you reset well, and then as you continue, you start getting desperate with the legs, or you lose it a bit, and then it turns into this like small flailing with the legs, and that doesn't get you anywhere. So it's always about like getting the legs back down. But like you do one jump, you get two jumps, and once you can do like 3-4 jumps, it's basically just about repeating the process, and you can essentially learn to jump on one arm within a couple of months if you have a good foundation with. Whereas, like as you all know, if you listen to the podcast, like a one arm handstand takes a while.
Might take you a while, a couple of months, 2 months, handstand by summer. Yeah, I can even remember actually when I was in circus school, there was a guy, one of the acrobats in the year ahead of me. He was obviously good at handstand. He couldn't one arm, and he just decided he wanted to learn hand hops on one arm, and he just taught himself. And all he would do would basically do a tuck jump up to one arm handstand and start kicking. And eventually he got it.
Yep.
Like he was nowhere near to being able to hold a one arm handstand. He was kind of tumbling was his kind of thing. So obviously he had the body control upside down. But it was just like this process. Like I remember just kind of the first day beating himself into the floor a bit, and me kind of laughing a little. And then it just like, I don't know, a month or two later, he just had them. He was even put them in his final show. So it was quite, it was quite very, very quick and very direct. So obviously people listen to this, if you have some background in tumbling and other stuff, you might find the one arm hops quite easy.
Yeah.
Say easy.
Yeah, they are definitely like I think they're also like kind of undervalued in in what they can actually contribute to learning a one-arm handstand too, since it's it does build a fair amount of stability and experience on one arm. Like the main thing with the hand hops though is that like you are jumping on one hand, which means that like your wrist you need to take care. Like when you have good hand hops, when you're warmed up and you feel good in your wrists, like it's not a problem to do a bunch of jumps, but like you just need to really like pay attention as you learn them, because like there is going to be quite a lot of impact on something that you're not used to doing. But like if you, as I said, if you have a good foundation in terms of like if your two arm handstand is super strong, if you're decent, like if you're able to do an L kick or similar things so that you can kind of enter into that sort of position and then like and have good two arm hops, like it's pretty easy to get a hang on or get the hang of getting a couple. And again, like if you ever want to advance towards like the super advanced one arm vocabulary of switches and so on, like you're just much better off having that kicking ability, because that's literally what you use as you swap hands on the block. You need that snap, and you don't need like you're not trying to jump to the moon. You're just trying to make your center of mass go up very precisely at a particular point so that you can get the other hand onto the block. And if you have that sensation and that timing, like it is a lot faster to learn than if you just basically have no idea of like what the hell is going to happen as you kick your legs. Like I know some people that are really good on one arm but can't jump for shit and try to do switches. It just turns into like a really bad walk where you just get stuck on your hand and you just don't understand like how can the other hand leave the floor, sort of the situation.
It's definitely one of the interesting things I think about the hopping is like when you're first learning them, generally you need to do quite a big movement with the legs to generate the momentum.
Yeah, it's true.
Then when you get the idea behind it, the movement becomes quite small. Like it can be quite like kicking. I remember seeing some breakdance dudes and they were barely like bending and extending their legs. The legs were kind of staying slightly bent, and there was probably only like 10-15 degrees of motion or 10% of the range of motion. Very little, but they were just doing it. It's that like kind of precision of just like little hop back to the chamber, little hop back to the chamber. Just that kind of finding the rhythm to it.
Rhythm is huge on it. Like there is a couple of videos of Lil Amok who does like legs together hops where he just does it from the shoulder. He just like literally just pops the shoulder with no movement in the legs. It looks ridiculous, and like the jumps are not particularly high or anything, but it works. But rhythm is important on that, and that is actually like an important part of all of these moving on the hands things. Like you want to be able to set a rhythm for basically any of them, or like at least be able to set a rhythm. Since like with hops, it's very important when learning, since it gives you like when I learned them on to music, because breaking of course, but it becomes easier because you have something to relate to. You need to be down with the legs at a certain count and up with the legs at a certain count, and that makes it easier to hold. But also for walks, like you don't need to walk to music, but the fact that you can keep kind of consistent like bum 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 with the placement of your hands. First of all, it means that like you're likely moving at a consistent pace with your body, and it's something that will make it easier for you to be able to speed up and slow down, because like you will have to kind of then like increasingly or increase your speed of the rhythm of the arms and so on. So it's something to think about in terms of like the entire idea of moving on your hands. That this is a component that you don't think any rhythm at all when you're working on just a static balance.
Yeah, maybe that's why like hand balancers are favoring not moving skills, because none of us have rhythm. We're all just used to staying still. I know I don't, but
easy way to get away from it.
Easy way to get away from it. Yeah, you could even like use the metronome.
Yeah, fucking metronome. Not my favorite thing.
Yeah, I think that was like covers a lot
Yeah.
of what we wanted to go over today.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So
wrap it
start
up there.
walking around. I mean, fucking
Yeah.
hell. How many handstand? But seriously, for those of you who sit and scroll Instagram all day, how often do you see someone do a fucking handstand sequence, then they shift, like they change place in space, and then they continue their handstand sequence, such as I'm back on camera, I do some shit, then I switch to being 90 degrees to the camera, and then I continue to do some shit. When's the last time you saw that? Almost never, because everyone trains in the exact same fashion and order, filming from this angle if you do that, filming from that angle if you do that, but like change things up, like mess around a bit. It can be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the interesting things in acts as well. Like, obviously, some tricks look better in different facing directions. But it's rare that you'll see someone go like, "Oh, I'm doing my back to the audience facing direction, and then I'll shift 90 degrees and do some Mexican style skills, which look better side on." So there is kind of an interesting placement or not placement, an interesting place for this to be put into creative work as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Neglected.
Yeah, it becomes like the how to say the geometry thing of the federation is so strong that you must present it from this angle, or else it has no value.
The Federation says, "Don't walk."
Yeah,
Fight
never.
the Federation. Let's wrap it up there.
Yes.
And it was good to have you back. It was good to be back with
Yes,
you as well.
indeed. Glorious.
Other than that, thank you for tuning in to the Handstand Cast, and we will see you next week.
Cheers.
The Handstandcast is brought to you by Handstand Factory and is produced by Motion Impulse. Thanks for tuning in. You can find a full transcript of each episode along with the show notes and any relevant references on handstandfactory.com/podcast. Thanks to Isaac for editing and Jordan for transcriptions. Music by Daniel Horwath. If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee on buymeacoffee.com or consider starting one of our Handstand Factory online programs. Links are in the show notes.